Ultimately, what I want for people is to learn how to listen to their intuition and their radar and literally be sovereign over their own choices, whatever it is.
When did we get so discernment? Is being sick permanent? Is that disease your identity? What does it mean? Who are you really? Just a body, or are you energy? A field of feeling and frequencies. We are memories in motion. Like electric ocean.
People come into these things at different times, and the more people get familiar and comfortable with themselves and asking these bigger questions, they're going to be less dependent on the things from the outside.
Left our herbalists and got pharmacists asking the experts instead of our own hearts. Diets and regimens, toxic medicine, sick and depressed, exhausted and stressed. Safe to express, don't have to repress. You've got permission, health is your mission. Life isn't one size fits all. You are not a protocol. Breaking the pattern, clearing the static. Symptoms are symbols, pain is a signal. Your body knows the song of your soul. Here we go.
Welcome to the One Within All. You're tuned in to the InnerVerse, and I'm your host, Chance. By the time this podcast reaches you, the sun will have stepped fully into that glorious Taurus season, which is always a magnificent time to build the bridge between our biology and beliefs. And you regular listeners know that this is the best show out there where medicine meets metaphysics. So as this season of the year resonates with earthly self-care energies, we are called to remember that health doesn't come from our hustle. It emerges from our harmony. You're not a machine to optimize. You're a terrain to landscape. And like any garden, your body blooms when boundaries, nutrients, and cycles are properly honored. Which brings us to today's guest, a futuristic physician and brilliantly keen clinician, Dr. Craig Koniver, the founder of Koniver Wellness, a performance medicine clinic that uses cutting-edge tools to help the body remember how to thrive. As a classically trained MD from Brown University, who had the guts to break away from the medical industrial complex herd mentality, he's unique among the majority of credentialed mainstream quacks out there because over the years, he's continually invested his awareness into the cutting edge of nutritional and supplemental sciences, learning things that many doctors dismiss while falling back on their old training. And he has equally unlearned all that is broken within the typical doctor's educational indoctrination. Years ago, Dr. Koniver ditched the 7-minute visit model, pharmaceutical scripts, and poison prescriptions, and exhausting insurance treadmills. And he's instead built a nationally renowned firm, international really, modeled on the patient's personal sovereignty, self-awareness, mind-body synergy, and a continually updated protocol, surfing the frontiers of functional medicine. Better yet, Dr. Koniver isn't just a clinician. He's one of my favorite long-term Biofield tuning clients and has been a huge help to my practice thanks to the many clients he's referred my way. From hormones to light therapy, mindset to mitochondria, sleep strategies to supplemental secrets, this conversation is poised to be both a soul-tuning merger of physical biology and spiritual epiphany, and also an educational symphony of many cutting-edge modalities and treatments that I, for one, know very little about. Don't forget to check the show notes for the many ways you can support InnerVerse, the link to Koniver Wellness online. And I want to give a big thanks to the many supporters tuning in who get extended episodes and support this podcast. Settle in, take a deep breath, and get ready to bring home some big knowledge with the peptide pathfinder and Biofield friendly Dr. Craig Koniver. Welcome to the InnerVerse, my friend, and thank you for joining me.
No, thank you, Chance. I appreciate that introduction. That was amazing. Yeah, it's awesome to be here talking to you.
It's about time, right? We've been dancing around getting this thing recorded for a couple months, and the time is right. Like I said, the astrological climate actually is perfect for this particular topic. And that's how synchronicity works. You just go with the flow and trust it. But hey, man, let's just talk about how you left the conventional model of family medicine. You built yourself a paradigm shifting performance medicine practice based on holistic tools, client empowerment, cutting edge science. You know, we're both healers who are on the frontiers of metaphysical and medical modalities that tune the whole being. You're working with molecules. I'm working with vibration and harmonics. So let's talk about what pulled you toward performance medicine, what that is, who you are, introduce yourself and what you do.
No, I appreciate that. I'm here in Charleston, South Carolina, where I opened my practice in 2006. I always wanted to do things differently in medicine, in part just because of somewhat being entrepreneurial, but also somewhat being a contrarian. I learned very quickly when I started my practice, well, probably before that in, my residency in family medicine, even medical school training, that it is so shifted towards the pharmaceutical model. It is, so overwhelmingly about the doctor or the provider listening just a little bit, but mostly thinking about what can I prescribe this patient to keep this patient on a certain wheel and track to manage not the patient, but manage the medicines that the patient's on. And that was just so disconcerting from such an early stage that when I was able to open my own practice and really started to kind of straddle both sides of the fence, meaning, sure, I'm not against prescription medicine. I think it's just way overdone. But also helping people from mindset perspectives, looking at things from a root cause. My world opened up. And since that time, it's just evolved to where now, mostly what I do is helping people shift their mindset to understanding kind of the larger picture and the bigger questions in life. Because I think that's what it's all about, is figuring out, as I say, and I'm sure you've said, and lots of people who get it, all healing is self-healing, and all self-healing is just remembering who we are.
That's beautiful. Wonderful. And that's why, even though we may have some differences in method, maybe priority, even, like, you are coming and meeting people where they're at who are, I guess, ready to step away from the more traditional allopathic model, but maybe they still need the training wheels of like, here, take this or get that treatment. And the fact is, even though it's not really my cup of tea, some of those things, there are results, there are benefits, and there are things that I want to open myself up to learn about in this field of science, despite being somebody that's constantly, ripping on everything materialistic and physicalist. That the fact remains that our biology does have componentry and it has functionality that can be influenced by material ingredients. And so, there's value here to learn about. And I want to be the open book host that is ready to take on stuff that's even outside of my comfort zone a little bit. So I'm admitting that to you, that like some of the things I've heard you discuss even are practically like too much for me to consider, like injecting stuff and all that. But hey, that doesn't mean that there isn't value there. So I want to get deeper into all that.
The reason I call it performance medicine, I don't like the functional medicine approach. Really, functional medicine to me was you have providers and doctors who really are, still treating this for that. And that the idea of treating this for that to me will never work. So you're replacing pharmaceuticals with nutraceuticals. And then and so I'm used to it. We know lots of people who end up being on 30 to 50 supplements a day and saying, I'm healthy. You're like, really? I mean, in our society as a whole, I think, what I tell people, greater than 50% of Americans are overweight, tired, depressed, and on more than one pharmaceutical, yet we judge how healthy we are by the number of pharmaceuticals we're on. And then you have the functional medicine people treating us like we're robots, like you alluded to. We're not robots. And so the idea of just smashing things and replacing parts, it obviously doesn't work. And so that's why I'm not really comfortable with functional medicine. I call it performance medicine, although that's evolving for me, because I think ultimately what I want for my patients and everyone I care about is to help them perform their best at any age, right? It's not like, I don't even agree with this whole longevity model, which is now taking off into like anti-aging longevity. I don't even know what that means. Like, that's very abstract, not tangible. And it's really not realistic or pragmatic at all to be like, oh, I want to do this today so I can lead my best life in 20 years. I literally don't know what that means to people, you know what I mean? Or to me. And so I do think that, as a whole, a lot of the tools I use, from like peptides to hormones, nutrients, even to prescription medicine, I just see it as a bridge. It's a bridge to help get people to a place where they can finally trust that actually they can do it on their own. That's the key, I think.
Yeah. And there's really something to be said about what I've heard you talk about in the past. Like, the first thing you want to do is get somebody feeling better.
Yes.
And sometimes it is like the Band-Aid, kind of medicinal approach to get someone feeling better. And once we have that achieved, then the mind can start to follow. It's true that the body follows the mind, but it's also true that the mind follows the body. It's a two-way street. So I think that's why we are given this kind of tripartite mind, body, spirit, so that we feel stuck in one place. We're not evolving in one place. We can work at another place. So that's why I really love the synergy between like your approach, my approach,
Sure.
people of our sort.
Yeah. Well, I think, and I, you may have said this, maybe, I don't know, but I know you agree with it. Conventional medicine is very much based on get a diagnosis first. And the problem with that is we know that the diagnosis is the disease. So once you label someone with diabetes or heart disease or cancer or Alzheimer's, by and large, the fear that's created from that diagnosis then is the motivating factor to then do all the things and make more decisions out of fear, which then obviously we know attracts more fear. And this becomes the major problem, I think. And you take something like COVID, which was such a debacle, and you caused lots of people who never had faith in the conventional medical world to start questioning it. Now they're questioning doctors, which is healthy, super healthy. That, to me, if people can just get some small wins, what matters most is developing rapport with people. Because if I don't have rapport and they don't trust me, why would they ever want to do anything I advise? They just wouldn't. And so that's why it's common now in the world I live in practice, people collect doctors. That's the norm. They don't just go to one doctor. They have 4 or 5 doctors that they see. And they're like, shooting these different opinions off each other and then coming up with collectively what they think is best, which is fine. But ultimately what I want for people is to learn how to listen to their intuition and their radar and literally be sovereign over their own choices, whatever it is.
Yeah, I love that. So we've got the purpose built in here. Now, I don't think we need to necessarily talk about the things that this audience is familiar with, why the mainstream medical model is a failure, what's coming next with all that. I mean, we can maybe get into it a little bit, but I am more interested in getting right into some very useful, life-changing awarenesses about how our body works. In particular, this is one that I needed to hear when I've heard you on podcast interviews preparing for this, about the sleep window, 10 p.m. to midnight, why that is such an alchemical hour or 2 hours for our body. Stuff I had no idea about, but I've been kind of intuiting in my own experience. When I do, when I don't get that window of sleep in, and more often than not, I'm too stoked about my projects to actually get to bed on time. But teach me about this. Help me get this into my thick skull, why I should be going to bed earlier.
Yeah. I mean, I think I break it down. I think the way I think about it is we are hardwired, hormonally to be catabolic during the day, which is cortisol driven, which I'll get into it. And then when we go to bed, which we'll get into why going to bed around 10 p.m. matters, to be anabolically driven while we sleep. And so catabolically driven, if we just think about cortisol, which is our stress hormone, our primary hormone during the day, really mimics the sun, right? So if we think back to thousands of years ago before we had artificial anything, when people woke up and they have a spike in cortisol, it's because they literally had to save their life, right? They had to find food, they had to find shelter, they had to literally take care of themselves. So that's why, in part, we need that spike of cortisol because we had to get stuff done. Cortisol means catabolic wear and tear. And as the day goes on and the sun starts to settle down, you don't need as much energy, right? You don't need to be doing all the things you do come afternoon and then evening. And we think, again, on average, our cortisol should be at its lowest point around 10 p.m. to allow the anabolic hormones, testosterone, growth hormone, and melatonin to take off so that we can be anabolic at night. Anabolic means, healing, mending, repair, because guess what? We got to repair our tissues because when the time comes around, the sun gets up in the morning, we got to do it all over again. And so that cycle to me is very powerful. And so from 10 p.m. really to 2 a.m., we secrete the most growth hormone, which may be the most anabolic hormone, meaning has the highest concentration of allowing our tissue and cells to repair. And, what seems to happen as people, live life, get into their third or fourth decade, is they start to mismanage these cortisol cycles, which then has a negative impact on things like testosterone production, growth hormone production, obviously melatonin. And then people get stuck because now they don't sleep as well because they don't have those anabolic hormones. In part, they wake up, they don't feel rested because their cortisol, they don't get that spike. And now they have to caffeinate, stimulate. They don't look at the sun. They're not out in those natural rhythms. They're looking at artificial light. They don't get that cortisol boost. They don't feel good during the day. And guess what happens? They put their kids to bed, right? Or they finally get some downtime and they put on Netflix or pull out their phone. And that blue light then stimulates their cortisol further. So now instead of having their cortisol close to zero, their cortisol spikes at nighttime, and they're going to blunt the anabolic hormone output. And what I think it happens is, from a metabolic and hormonal perspective, we are flexible into that third and fourth decade, but then it catches up with us. And that's where I see most people coming in in the 40s and 50s, and they just don't feel good. And I place a lot of value in understanding those relationships with, how hardwired they are in those natural cortisol rhythms.
That's so important to understand. We all have experienced it, right? But to hear the scientific biological breakdown, I think drives the point home that we all know that we'll go to bed at 2 a.m., even if you sleep till 10 and you got 8 hours. It's a very different feeling than sleeping from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. Just completely different feeling. So I love that. I love thinking about even some of the mystical subtext in a word, right? This isn't the mainstream etymology of it, but cortisol has cor, which comes from a Latin root meaning heart, and then it has soul in it, which is the sun, right? So it's like talking about this heart energy that is affected by the sun, that is driven by the sun.
Totally.
And that we want that energy. We want our heart in that state of get stuff done while the sun is out. But if you invert that, you're going to be hurting. Inverting, hurting.
For sure. And I see it because we do a lot of saliva cortisol testing, because that seems to be the best medium to test this, because you can measure your cortisol throughout the day in a 24-hour period. And so we see these rhythms being disrupted, and then it very much, is in line with how people feel. And it's just an interesting phenomenon. And then taking it a step further, cortisol is really there as a buffer hormone, right? It's super anti-inflammatory. It's why people understand, people are getting a fever at night is because your cortisol is low, right? Most people are familiar with that. You feel worse at nighttime usually than during the day. It's not just because you're busy and doing stuff, but it's because your cortisol is low and you've lost that buffer to handle the, inflammation in your body. Now, again, that inflammation is good. We shouldn't necessarily fight it, but just recognizing it. And so it's these cycles which matter a lot. And then in the big picture, what I think happens is if one loses that cortisol reserve, and then a major stress happens, death of a loved one, loss of a job, pandemic, you then can be at risk for, breaking because you've lost that buffer. And that's where I think big disease happens. Cancer, heart disease, neurodegenerative disease, which is on the rise like crazy. It's because people don't pay attention to managing their stress, modulating their stress in a very healthy way.
That's super profound. And that's one of my favorite things to do in episodes is take a concept that people have a lot of fear or trepidation around, that it's something that's just intrinsically bad, a boogeyman, if you will. Cortisol, right? That's a word that the layman hears and they're like, ooh, not good. Cortisol, bad. But we're discussing how it has a sacred function in our body. It is way, way profoundly important, helpful, healthy. There's a reserve, there's a buffer of it. It's super, super cool to hear. And I just wanted to get your exact words about a mantra, if you will. It was something like every hour of sleep before midnight is worth X amount of hours of sleep after midnight. What was that? Like, what was that ratio?
I think between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. is the key time to get deep restorative sleep, where you're going to be secreting particularly growth hormone, which is then going to help repair your cells. So, I'd probably say it's 10 times as valuable, between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. versus, then 2 a.m. to say 6 a.m. Now, the interesting part about that, though, that I think about between 2 a.m. and 6 a.m., let's say you're definitely going to have more REM sleep. And the interesting aspect to me is the more I think about sleep is the more I think that the dream time may be more valuable than the repair time. Because I don't think we know anything really about sleep nor dreaming. Like, it's just really good guesses. But if I had to pick, and I think about what did people do in primitive times? No one was sleeping 8 hours, right? No one was like, fell asleep. The fire wasn't tended. They're worried about the environment and whatever. No one slept 8 hours. So where do we come up with this 8 hours seems very elusive to me and made up. And again, is one of these kind of functional aspects to conventional medicine that instills fear in people. Like, oh, if you don't get 8 hours, you're not going to be healthy.
It's factory farm humanity mindset.
Yeah, totally. And so if I think about what did people do in primitive times? Well, they were waking up probably every hour or 2 hours, checking the fire, making sure they're safe. And then they would sleep throughout the day. They would take naps, which is healthy, I think. I think it's great. Like, I love to nap. Like, I look forward to when I can nap. And then, so I think there's a component to you're repairing your tissue. And then there's a component which is, more mystical. What's happening when we dream? And the more I think about it, while I understand the value of repairing your tissue, I don't think you could argue, again, this is something I postulate, you can do that probably without having those deep restorative sleep hours. But the dreaming, I don't think we're really human, if we're not dreaming.
It's a true story. I personally put a whole new level of value on my dreams after our daughter, who's 6 months old now, she announced herself in a dream to me.
Oh,
Before
wow.
my wife knew she was pregnant, I had no idea whatsoever. Had a dream of having this little blonde girl and basically like, oh, this is happening, and told my wife about it. The next day she takes a pregnancy test. She's pregnant.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it was a very profound one because we'd had a miscarriage before that. So having a dream where this girl announces herself and then communicates to me in the dream that she's going to be fine and that she's very strong and resilient was like, this pregnancy is going to go great. Everything's fine. And we rode the power of that dream through the whole pregnancy. So you can't shortchange the value of the peace of mind aspect to your health and how important that might have been to have that perspective from my wife going through pregnancy after a miscarriage, to know that there's this mystical transmission that your baby is fine. You don't need to be afraid, because that could have changed everything. If she was more scared, it maybe would have had more of an effect on the pregnancy for the negative. You never know, right? And that would have been expected after a miscarriage. So what you say about dreams, I wholeheartedly agree. It's non-quantifiable. And that's where, medicinal science has a lot of troubles with these non-quantifiables, yet they make up such a disproportionate spread of the overall equation for health and well-being, energy and vitality. So that's why I respect that you do what you do, but you also refer people to get Biofield toning. And that's absolutely non-quantifiable for the most part.
Yeah. Well, I think, and I've heard you guys talk about it in your podcast, we are qualitative organisms living in a quantitative world. And that, has become even more so with all this data we're collecting and people wearing wearables. And in my realm, everyone wants their labs drawn. I'm like, what's my cholesterol? And what's this value? And they don't realize it's all made up. All of it's made up. All these reference ranges are made up. And a lot of them, again, not getting into the too negativity and about conventional medicine, but there is some very deep corruption going on that is very real, in putting people on pharmaceutical drugs and keeping them there for very, very nefarious reasons, which, what I like doing is helping people unwind that and understanding that, sure, you said you got 8 hours of sleep, but who cares what that number is? Why does it even matter? You know what I mean? Sure, you can count your macros and your calories, or you can say I did 30 minutes on a treadmill. It literally doesn't matter. That doesn't matter in your life at all. So I like that aspect of helping people appreciate the qualitative in the quantitative realm we are. And then, yes, referring to people like yourself who are a wizard and can help people. No, for real, and help people. I mean, all the people I've referred, and there's lots more, they all come back and they're just blown away. I finally am starting to get it. And they're having these very real, tangible wake-up moments, which is what life is about. And so now they're going to be more invested in walking that path and trusting and being open to what happened. One, what have I been doing the last 50 years of my life? And two, how I'm excited for the next 50. It's amazing. So
I appreciate you saying that. And the referrals you send my way are all excellent because they're people that are ready. They're ready to make the leap. They're ready to see the pattern. They're ready to transcend the previous model that they've been living under, the assumptions. I mean, it's so much based in assumptions. And that's what I think that I bring to the table is I'm pretty good at helping people find their subconscious assumptions about themselves and life that have been invisible by their proximity. And there's so much energy to reclaim by finding those and revising those. And it's actually fairly simple. So yeah, we'll keep having this great synergy of you doing what you do and I'm doing what I'm doing. Super fun. You want to say anything else about the biofield from your perspective, like conceptually, the, plasma, electromagnetic energy, all these different ways of trying to describe the same thing? I don't know how familiar you are with Eileen's work or her books.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I mean, I just think we're vibration, God created each of us as a unique vibrational signature. And, you mentioned in the intro, that we're not machines, we're more like gardens. And I would say, and I know you'd agree, I think the Western view is we are machines. The Eastern view is we're like gardens. But I think the view that you would probably subscribe to most is we're actually symphonies, right? And we're tuning the different instruments within us and creating those different harmonies. And I think that resonates more than, either the, machine versus the garden, and so I see that ultimately, to become bulletproof in a way is to figure out, how to increase your vibrational frequency to such a point that it doesn't matter, right? We have all these people who are living in fear of, we're being poisoned by our environment. We're being poisoned by the programming. Well, if you can get yourself to a state, which is completely possible if you believe it, you can get yourself to a vibrational frequency. Not that I understand that so much because this is things that are subtle, invisible, that aren't tangible per se, but have tons of meaning. If we can get people there little by little, then that's how we make such big change to all of the negativity in the universe.
I also think, everything you're saying is spot on. I also think it's important for people who maybe are coming to this conversation from your invitation, right? They know you, they're following your work, that there's an element to this mind-body healing, this idea of the human biofield, which is a way of describing the aggregate flow of energy in the space around your body, but more accurately, that it's the mind that your body is within. And the ultimate step out of the quantitative materialistic perspective, and everyone gets a choice about this perspective. No one can conclusively prove to you one way or the other. You have to choose your ground and maybe try out both if you haven't tried out the opposite, right? I think we all start out on the material ground, so to speak, but the idea that everything is mind and that all physical objects are objects within consciousness, within mind, meaning that your body is in your mind.
Sure.
And once we have that understanding, we're living in that world, then that applies to the whole world. It's all in your mind. It's all in not even in your head, so to speak. That's just a way of saying it. And then if that's true, then changes to your mind and changes to how the flow of your energy is operating based on your mind actually have the ability to affect the entire world. And this isn't like law of attraction, think really hard about getting that new car and you'll get it type stuff. This is like an understanding that nothing ever happened that was wrong, that even those cyclical recurring experiences, like this type of person always shows up in my life and they always betray me in this type of way, that is actually a reflection of an internal state, and that negative recurring experience or pattern is actually a signal from the universal mind that, hey, this is what you need to look at. This is what's going on with you. This is where you're stuck. And it's never even, so it's not even like a misfortune befalling you. It is a message. It is there for your benefit, there for your help. And I think we have that mentality. We can apply that to everything symptomological, even in our body. You know what I mean? It's like all there to help you.
Yeah. And I think that one of the toughest things people have who, you know, whether they operate in conventional medicine or come see me and kind of step out a little bit, is they have this belief that, you know, pain, suffering, illness is bad. And like you're alluding to, it's just messaging. It's just information from you to learn from. And I think from observing a lot of people over the years, this is just part of the human condition. And for many of us, we come to grow and learn through that suffering and understanding that it's there for us, not to us. And once people can make that switch in their mind, life gets super magical. But again, it's hard because they've been told like, oh, you have cancer, you know, you must do this chemotherapy, radiation, or else you're going to die within 6 months. And it's, you know, the guilt and shame that they've done something wrong is so powerful. And that if they don't follow the doctor's orders, bad things will, you know, come to them. That is a terrible model, but it's what we have. And so, you know, it's helping people understand that, like, no, likely all this started at some emotional level, probably when you were younger, maybe before you were even born. And now you get the opportunity to learn from it. And it may be, and I tell people, you know, the cancer diagnosis is probably the greatest gift anyone could be given, you know, because it's the ultimate opportunity to kind of course correct in such a profound way. And the hardest part, I think, and I think you'd agree with this, is detaching the outcome from it. Because people, they measure their, you know, whether it's good or bad, whether, oh, I beat cancer, like we're fighting cancer, which is very strange because I don't understand. Like you can't fight your body. Like that's a very strange concept, but that's where we are in this model. Like I'm going to beat it. And if I don't beat it, I'm failing. But actually, no, there is no destination. It's your opportunity to go on this walk where you get to live according on a very minute to minute, hour to hour, day by day opportunity to learn so much. And then once you learn it, be of service to others to help them.
Right. That's actually a shamanic insight that your most profound and painful struggle in your life is where you are most able to serve everybody else if you can overcome it. That's the shamanic initiatory healing crisis, right? And we have those, each of us, to smaller or larger degrees. I think that it's possible. I mean, it's just my theory, but I think it's possible to notice the signals of those things sooner than later and have a self-initiated process that is less being beat over the head with near-death crisis and more like a gradual shift into your vocational calling, right? I think that's possible too, but we get what we need. And it's interesting with cancer because you talk about fighting cancer. That's the terminology, right?
Right.
Now, how connected to repressed emotions do you think cancer tends to be?
Yeah, I mean, that's what it's all about.
Right. And Cancer in the zodiac is the most emotional, strong feelings part symbolically of the zodiac.
Interesting.
And it's the crab, right? So that's the shell, that the protective armor that is put around this soft emotional core. So to even be calling it cancer is over the heads of the very people who use that terminology in their diagnosis. It's very bizarre.
That's
But it's
interesting.
exactly what it is. It's like this protective shell, this tumor that is like wrapping around this physical toxicity that has been collected in your body as a manifestation of your inability to process stuck emotion, which is limiting the functionality of, say, if it's anger, your liver, if it's fear, it's your kidneys, etc. And so the organs aren't able to process that because you're not processing it on the feelings level, the mental level. And it shows up in the body as this hard shell, tumor. It's so wild.
That is wild. No, I like how you framed all that. That's super interesting. Yeah. Yeah. Really good.
It's all there in the words, right? Like we say deeper truths than we realize in our language all the time. But let's talk while we're at this point. What's the most exciting thing for you right now on the frontiers of your performance medicine? Like the maybe more experimental or cutting edge or new, whether it's technologies or supplements. What are you most stoked to talk about right now?
I mean, I'm most stoked to talk about how to help people, change their mindset. Honestly, like the more I do this, I've come up with, I'm sure it's not original to me, but what I think of is like the 5 main questions to help people heal. Right. And it's, what am I? What do I do? How I do it? Who am I? And then why am I? And I think where people come to see me, we focus first on what am I, which to me is like, we talked about molecules, like we're peptides, we're hormones, we're nutrients, we're our biome. It's very physical. And I think that's great. And I think that's where most people, in this kind of quantitative world, that's what can help get them the wins first. But the part I'm most excited about is the how do I? And I think about that as I call these the 3 biological temperaments, which really relates to, 1, self-worth, self-love, and self-safety. And if I had to like group how all of us have to deal on some level, it's usually one of those things stands forth, right? And it seems like it becomes our superpower. It's also our kryptonite. So for example, the self-worth is people from a very early age feel like they're not worthwhile. So they tend to bring things from the outside in, right? And these people then tend to have issues with their liver and addiction and things like that. The self-love is people don't feel enough self-love, so they have to be overachievers. They're bringing things from the inside out. These people tend to have issues with their mitochondria, which leads to all kinds of things like cancer and heart disease and diabetes. Then you have the self-safety issues where people just don't feel safe in their world. These tend to be like, we're talking about cortisol issues, and people get burnout and a whole host of things. And so it's helping people understand that, because I think once people can understand those larger issues and how to see the world that way, they can learn so much about themselves that then they're ready to transcend in a way pharmaceuticals and peptides and hormones. Certainly I love talking about peptides and all of the innovation there. And certainly we're known for that with our practice, and we've done a lot of amazing work with it. But if I'm being totally honest, it's more of the holistic, bigger picture. How do we connect mind, body, help people get off this quantitative experiment we're on?
I can't deny that I 100% agree with you, but my mind still wanders towards what if we had this alignment, mind, body, spirit, but instead of being like those yogis that then do the ascetic practice of just living off of sunlight because they can. What if we were all harmonious with our triplicate symphony, but then we also did these crazy cutting edge peptides and like, what would we become then? But I want to zero in on, first of all, those questions that you have offered to people that they can pose to themselves as a major part of the healing process, that if they took time with each of those, maybe even like, don't rush it to the point of spending a day or two on one, writing about it, ruminating about it. That was a big step for me in my personal growth. In college, I had a professor that just, the whole course was interrogating your spiritual belief system. And I had none. I was, I'd kind of lost all track of a faith system because I could see too much inconsistency in the one I was raised with.
Sure.
And was in a more atheistic, college kid in the early 2000s life. And my health was the worst it ever was. And you'd think as a early 20s person, I would be at my healthiest and in my prime. I was at the rock bottom of my current life incarnation, like that was rough. So I see now that it had to do with this drifting with no anchor of who I thought I was, what I thought life was, and just, being pushed around on other external tides. So this asking these kind of deep questions is why I do what I do. I keep the deep questions flowing for myself by having conversations like this. But there was one thing I would love for you to expand on. I mean, a lot of that line of interrogation and how it connects to different body functions is interesting to me, but self-love and mitochondria. Mm-hmm. Let's break that down. And I think people probably know what mitochondria is, but maybe give more of a entry level overview and why you see this connection.
Yeah. So the mitochondria are the batteries of the cells. So there's the interesting part. So we think from a, very conventional medical scientific biochemistry viewpoint, the mitochondria there take fuel, most of the things we eat, right? Fats, carbohydrates, and proteins, and then chemically turns that into ATP energy, chemical energy. And so that's like the battery of the cell. And so there's the interesting part, lots of interesting parts. There's not just one mitochondria per cell, but there can be thousands upon thousands of mitochondria per every single cell in the body. So we're talking about trillions upon trillions, numbers that are way incomprehensible to calculate in terms of the mass of our mitochondria, the significance of our mitochondria. And so, what we've learned from academic research over the last 10 years is it's those mitochondria when they're dysfunctional. And we can talk about what that means. That leads to, metabolic disease, cancer, heart disease, diabetes, neurodegenerative disease, even autoimmune disease. And so most people, as they age themselves and stress out their bodies, we're going to come to a point where we aren't keeping up with energetic demands. Now, it's debatable. And I think what's coming to light is, I think some of the calculations initially with, how much ATP and what that ATP does, that's adenosine triphosphate. And supposedly the energy of the body is held within those bonds of the ATP. And the mitochondria makes the highest quantity of that ATP in our body. So if you look at the heart cells, the eye, right, the retina, and the nervous system, those are the three cell lines, probably the ovaries, the fourth, that's the highest concentration of mitochondria in the body. And so if we start thinking about where do we wear down, that's where we see it. Because we wear out our mitochondria, we disrupt them from, non-native EMFs and toxicities and pharmaceuticals and all these things. And then certainly, which I know you agree with, probably the largest negative impact to any of this is the negative self-banter, right? That people just constantly feed themselves and then wonder why they get sick at some point. Well, if you're constantly telling yourself you're a bad person because you ate that piece of cake, no wonder it catches up with you, right? Because your cells are listening, right? And you're literally impacting. And that's where I think of this self-love, is because if you are not telling yourself how amazing you are, because for most people, they just can't get there. They literally don't believe it. Whether that's childhood trauma, they've been yelled at and screamed at and told they're a horrible person, or they just haven't been able to figure it out. they tend to then say that. I mean, almost every patient I see, they say that they beat themselves up on some level with the guilt and shame for not being enough, and not loving themselves enough. And I just think that over time, like, sure, if you're 15, 25, you can probably handle it. Now you're 35, 45, it's taking its toll. And so it's very hard, which is fine, to quantify that effect on something like the mitochondria. But it's just observational that the people who seem to get worn out from that mitochondria perspective seem to be the type A. Like, they just have to work overtime, put their foot on the gas just to prove themselves, because ultimately they're telling themselves that they love themselves without telling themselves they love themselves, I think.
Fascinating, man. And then on a Biofield perspective, that guilt-driven tendency to overdo it is obviously very prevalent in Western culture, right? It's like,
Sure.
You can label it all kinds of ways. No pain, no gain.
Well,
I got to work myself to the bone in every spare moment till I'm exhausted. That comes down, although most people aren't looking at it this way, it comes down to a self-worth value system that tells oneself, I'm only good enough if I left it all on the field, if I've got nothing left in the tank. And that is a quantitative transactional mentality between self and, being and doing, where, interestingly enough, things don't work that way. They don't have to work that way. I give people, especially when I work with them in the Biofield tuning sessions for this particular issue, is I like to give the type of mindset of, think about how your cell phone works. Whenever your cell phone is at 100% battery, it's fast, it's crisp, it's quick, everything's crushing. When it's at 2% battery, it's like, So why would you think that you are better by working yourself till your battery's drained? You're not.
Totally.
Everything you do is going to be worse. You're going to feel worse about it too. It's just a qualitative loss across the board.
Sure.
And this shows up in people's right hip, oddly enough, more than anywhere else in their energy field or in their physical body, to the point where now we have an interesting correlation between the prevalence of this mindset and late life hip replacement in the West. It's like, why are the old people needing their hips replaced all the time?
Yeah.
Probably because, especially a certain generation, even more so than maybe my generation, was beaten into their head that, like, you got to work hard, Sonny. But you're going to, like, I tell people the value system shift is my highest value is when I'm full of energy. My highest value is at the highest level of charge. I'm most valuable when I am most rested. Things like that, and if you make that a mantra, and maybe even like when you start to feel like you're dragging or you're not getting enough done, intentionally stop, take, whether it's 5 seconds, 30 seconds, 5 minutes, just take some deep breaths and remind yourself, I value myself most when I'm most full of energy. If you make that a practice, it is life-changing. I have clients that have told me, like, my energy levels are completely night and day different than before I made this mental switch. They're doing the same amount of stuff, but they're doing it better, and they're doing it with less feeling of resistance, fatigue, exhaustion, and, suffering. So it's very easy. It's a very easy switch. Sometimes we need to get in there with the Biofield and figure out what are the roots experientially, trauma-wise, what have you, that are anchoring this belief into you. But there are ways that you can stabilize that without excavating your memory field. These
Totally.
stabilizing statements. Eileen's actually got a book coming out soon on that very thing, stabilizing statements.
Mm. Yeah. And I think tying it back to, and I like all that, tying it back to kind of what do I do practically is we help people with mitochondrial therapies. So we use a lot of NAD+, which is a vitamin B3 derivative. People call it NAD, nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide, which seems to be the rate limiting substrate. It's a vitamin B3. So it's a chemical cousin of niacin. That seems to be the rate limiting substrate for our mitochondria to make ATP. And so we've had a tremendous amount of success of giving people external NAD to kind of rejuvenate their mitochondria and very tangibly feel more energy. It's recharging the battery. We do the same thing with methylene blue, which is becoming a, super popular nutrient, works on a different part of the mitochondrial chain, but it's very similar to NAD. And these are very real practical feelings that people get in very real practical ways. And again, going back to, we talked about this earlier, is for a lot of people I see, entering in, they need some small wins before they're ready to wake up and think bigger than themselves and outside of themselves, just for, the conventional approach. And so me being an MD makes them feel safe, like, oh, you can write prescriptions, but you have a lot of experience using these mitochondrial tools. And then it really works. I mean, for the vast majority of people, it's a big, uplift to their nervous system very quickly.
Yeah, that's awesome. You've got something for everybody. And this conversation's really given me the confidence that you are going to work with the person on the mindset level first, and that's the priority, but that you're there with these more supplemental material tools when needed. I don't know enough to know one way or the other about biochemistry and pharmacology, but I do know I have other friends in this space of alternative medicine, online, that in particular have started a lot of criticism of methylene blue. And I don't know exactly why, but, are there reasons why you would not want to go there first, or do you think that it's actually perfectly fine? Like, what are your thoughts? I know you've yourself used it.
Yeah. I mean, I have a lot of experience with it. So, I learned about methylene blue in the early stages of COVID. I met this doctor and he said he was having tremendous success of turning people who are, COVID positive on a test to COVID negative within 3 days using methylene blue, which was fascinating to me. I mean, this is again, early, probably 2020, 2021. And so we started looking into methylene blue and understanding that it's actually, it was the first pharmaceutical ever written in this country before antibiotics. Traditionally, it's used for carbon monoxide poisoning. So it helps to put oxygen on the cell. And then if you dig deeper, it certainly acts as an antiviral, but it's a mitochondrial enhancer. And so there's very few contraindications for me using methylene blue. By the book, it's an MAOI inhibitor, meaning if someone's taking a serotonergic drug like Prozac, by the book, they should separate the dose of Prozac or any SSRI from methylene blue intake, we say by 4 hours, although I've never seen any interaction that's been negative. My observation from treating thousands and thousands of people with it, it's maybe the best cognitive enhancer I've ever seen. And so the feedback is super positive. They're like anything though, if the more people use something, they're going to get less of an impact from it. And so I don't like people to use it every day just because anything you take every day, it's going to render it less potent for you over time. So we'd like to build breaks in there and we want the least effective dose for the maximum output. But it's hard for me to find negatives for methylene blue. I mean, they may exist. In my clinical experience, I haven't experienced that.
Well, I know that in your line of work, you don't necessarily have to rubber stamp everything I say, but when I hear antiviral, when I hear makes a COVID test go from positive to negative, I'm like, PCR test? Kary Mullis, anybody? Like, do we really have any ground to stand on with virology, right? I've done some good stuff on that. And we don't have to take that digression unless you just want to. But what I found fascinating that I didn't know about methylene blue was the MAOI inhibitor aspect. And for all we know, maybe it's that aspect of it causing your body to endogenously absorb more neurotropic molecules from your food. I'm thinking like dimethyltryptamine that's present in most plant substance that your body actually breaks down in digestion, but maybe you're getting more of that. And that's potentially, it's very linked to pineal function.
Sure.
And that DMT intake that may be altered by something like an MAOI inhibitor could be part of the cognitive enhancement. Like you're actually straddling the line more between the dream state and waking state and feeling more flow and inspiration from that. That's interesting. I actually did not know that it was a MAOI inhibitor.
Yeah, it is. I agree with you fully about COVID testing viruses in general. Like we're on the same page. What I would say to that though is most people aren't. And so most people, and then this, I can't
They're going
convince
to feel
anyone.
better if they have a negative test than a positive if they believe in that boogeyman.
Yeah. But I also know I can't convince anyone of anything. So that's not my job ever, but I can plant seeds. And I do have these conversations with people, and I start to tell them, like, I wouldn't be doing my job if I wasn't speaking my truth and, showing you the other side of the equation. And this happens so much in medicine where, the best example, whether it be antiviral or what comes up every day, is people being put on cholesterol lowering drugs to prevent heart disease. This is such a big topic, and there's so much fear around it. And we talk about it every day, is that, the standard of care is to put someone on a cholesterol lowering drug to supposedly help prevent having a heart attack. Well, I don't agree with the entire paradigm that says elevated cholesterol leads to plaque, leads to, closing off a coronary artery, which leads to you losing oxygen and blood flow to that part of the muscle. And so I tell them that I don't have all the answers, but I certainly want to ask questions, because there is no more informed consent in medicine. Doctors are not telling patients the full side of the story ever. They're only telling them partial side of the story. And I have a big problem with that. And I have a big problem that people can't make informed choices anymore. Right. And then I have that conversation. Oh, did you know lowering your cholesterol actually puts you at risk for both dementia and Alzheimer's dementia? Oh, no, my doctor never told me. Well, it's there and it's real. And again, not that I'm there to decide for you, but I certainly want to ask questions, because that's where it starts to get good. So I agree with you on the whole viruses. We've never seen a virus. They don't exist. And now we have an entire field of medicine against something that doesn't exist to then help, again, it's not real. Most people aren't there yet. It's very hard for them to conceptualize.
That's brilliant. Yeah. Do not exist. Never been isolated, purified, or verified. That's just the facts. I really find it profound that as an MD yourself, you're saying nobody has informed consent anymore with this stuff. I mean, there's so many areas that could apply to, in particular, the fact that even if something prescribed is studied to some degree that is valid at all, although even the replication crisis throws shade at even all of the official and properly done studies, right? Then there's the whole compounding factor of, like, if you're getting prescribed something by your family practice doctor, you're probably on 4 other things, 10 other things by the time you're in an advanced age. And the studies of A, B, and C together, or all 10 things at the same time, well, that is totally non-existent. So there's, like, the doctor can't give you informed consent information when they themselves are uninformed. Nobody is informed. It's crazy.
I mean, it's wild, but most people aren't thinking about this, right? And so they say, again, knowing that the reality is people are collecting doctors, people are being given medicines, and they're saying, you need to take this, right? Otherwise, you're going to put your health at risk. And if we just even take several steps back from that, and look at the standard of care, we spend more money than any other country, and our outcomes are absolutely horrible. We're not making a dent in anything: heart disease, cancer, autoimmune disease, neurodegenerative disease. Yet that is the standard of care. And so it's very challenging for people, to know what to do and to know, like, how to navigate this. And they don't even know they're being bamboozled. And again, I coming from it, and I can say this, I don't think most doctors are nefarious or have bad intentions. But I also would say most of them haven't taken the time to critically think about how they can help a patient. And so I don't blame them for not. Well, I can blame them, actually, because I think it's a shame. I'll say that, right? That you could practice medicine, which isn't really medicine anymore. It's literally a party line of prescribing that don't work and that cause. I think in the top 5 cause of death in this country is position and hospital error. That's massive, massive.
That's officially reported statistics, like how much is going under the radar too.
Yeah.
All I know is I've never had a relative or someone I cared about go into a hospital, especially when they're older, and come out better than when they left. I mean, that's just never happened. Now, maybe there's some, like, I don't want to totally reject all Western medicine. You get an injury or you're in a life-threatening crisis, you got to get stabilized. I'm happy they're there for that. I am. And I think that there's intent that is good, that is overshadowed by fear-based ignorance, fear of losing your credentials, fear of losing your status, fear of losing your paycheck, fear of being ostracized by the rest of the community. But on this subject, I think we're kind of preaching to the choir, but on this subject of informed consent, what is most profound to me is how that applies to the dietary world, that nobody can tell you your diet that's optimal for you. No matter what reason someone's like, this is the best diet and here's why, you can find the exact opposite, equally compelling evidence for why that's wrong and actually should do the complete polar opposite. So maybe we talk about diet from your perspective and how you teach.
Yeah, happy to do that. I'll just share with you though, really quickly, when you say, I've never met someone who had a better outcome. And I'll share a personal story about me, which I think is relevant. In August of 2020, I came down with this really horrific abdominal pain. And I thought, I'll treat it myself. And I thought it was a gut infection. Did this for several weeks and it just got worse and worse. It became the worst pain I've ever experienced. So I have a friend who's a radiologist. I had him do a CAT scan and I'm driving back to my office and he calls me. He's like, you need to go to the emergency room. I said, why? He said, you have a blood clot in your portal vein, which is the vein going back to the liver. And he said, it's almost completely closed off. Like, this is a medical emergency at this point. So grabbed my wife, Kelly, who you work with, went to the emergency room. And it was really closer than I thought. Major blood clot. And a couple interesting things happens. And this is, I think, the interesting part of the story. The ER doctor came in and said, hey, did you see the full CAT scan report? I said, no. At the time, I was 46 years old. And he shows it to me. And the radiologist read that I had cancer in the head of my pancreas. And that's obviously a big deal because in general, when you have pancreatic cancer, it's pretty much a death sentence pretty quickly. I think probably most people with pancreatic cancer die within 1 year of diagnosis. So it's a big deal. And he said, listen, we're going to put you on a blood thinner. We're going to have to repeat the MRI. And so whatever happened, this was during COVID. So Kelly had to leave. They took me up to the radiology suite and for whatever reason, they were delayed and I was there by myself. And I had the most glorious sense of being with God and feeling like all of these people were caring about me and like sending me heartfelt positivity and love. And it's one of the best moments of my life. I wouldn't trade it for anything. And so then the next morning, that same ER doctor came in and he said, did you see the MRI report? I said, no. And he said, well, I was thinking about you all night. So I went and looked it up. He goes, and I don't usually get to give good news, but you don't have pancreatic cancer. And I can't tell you if I really did have pancreatic cancer or if it was misread. But all I can tell you is I had the opportunity to feel that connection to God and feel the love of so many people at one moment that I don't think I could feel in another way. I think it took me being really at the verge of being super sick. And so I wouldn't trade that for a thing. Now, I think that blood clot came from some COVID weird thing, whatever that is, but I'm still on a blood thinner today. Like I know cerebrally, I don't need it, but there's still part of me I can't get there. And I'll just be vulnerable and say that. So I still take this medicine and I feel great. I don't have any side effects from it. But, I think some of the outcome that we look at, and I understand what you're saying, is there's no like positivity. I think it's because, again, we're looking for a cure or we're looking for some exchange of something to happen, where I would say the blessing of being hospitalized and the blessing of being sick is for being sick. Period. And being able to experience that.
I got to thank you for flipping my couch around there. I was being way more hyperbolic than truthful with how I phrased that. Of course, there's people that I've known and it's just not sticking out of my memory, right? Yeah. That have had some beneficial outcome, right? And that story you told is phenomenal. I would call that. You have nothing other than your own experience in your own consciousness to gauge reality on. And in your reality, you were at the edge and you experienced a miraculous divine love energy. and you came out the other side of it with healing. Like that is just amazing. So thank you for that story. That's so profound.
No, it is. No, it is. I love sharing it because it's so impactful in my life. And there's a, kind of a before and after where I look at that. I'm like, I can be a better healer and doctor because I went there. And I've seen it from you. I mean, working with you, like you're tapped in ways, which is just amazing to be a part of. Like that's what I enjoyed most, is when you can tune and pick up on stuff in such a profound way, and it's very authentic. And that is persuasive. I think it's the authenticity. It just stands out to me.
That's wonderfully said. Thank you for that, man. This has been, I knew it would be good, but exceeds expectations, Doc. Good. Exceeds expectations for sure. Learned a lot. Not going to lie, kind of want to inject an exorbitant amount of pineal and just see what happens.
For sure.
I'll be a confession. I've done dimethyltryptamine. Mm-hmm. So like, I know what the max looks like. I kind of want to see if there's like a more livable version, but anyway, this is awesome. Great talking with you, man. I want to give you the floor for closing thoughts, for letting people know how they can work with you and the range of possibilities with your services online or in clinic. Please take it away. And thanks for your time today.
No, thank you, Chance. I mean, I've gotten to know you over the years, listening to your podcast, and then my wife and I, and now, referring people to you, and I told my wife this sincerely, like you're such a guiding light, just from a proactive health standpoint, but I've told her, like, if I ever ran into health trouble, I'm coming to you first. And I say that sincerely because you just have, again, this authenticity. So it's been amazing. I just find that good people find each other. That's the way it's really amazing to watch God work kind of behind the scenes. And we have a special practice. We're here in Charleston, South Carolina. You can find us online or on Instagram at Koniver Wellness. We are not for most people. We're for people who are really ready to dive into their health, their performance, be presented with lots of options. Authenticity matters most. I've been asked lots of times to franchise and have clinics all over. I don't want any part of that. I don't want more. I just want better. To me, it's about building relationships, getting to know people. And I get to work with the very best people, and I get to learn selfishly from those interactions. And then I take that forward and help other people. And that's my calling. That's why I'm here. And I love it and I embrace it. So being able to be on this platform with you and get to meet your audience, which I'm a member of your audience, it's truly amazing for me. So thank you.
Man, the heart is warm. The heart is warm. Well, we'll have to do it again sometime. If you ever have something you want to talk about on the show, just hit me up, or maybe we'll do kind of a fun future conversation where we bring in another thinker, do like a merger. Personally, I'm thinking how cool it would be with her degree in, what's the field? I don't remember the exact degree. It's like she has the degree in like general all over medicine health. Eileen McCusick and Craig Koniver talk would be really cool to like further bridge that physical, biochemical to metaphysical, spiritual, energetic. So anyway, I see a lot of possibilities in future collaborations, and it's just a pleasure and an honor. Thanks so much, man.
Thank you, Chance. I appreciate it.
If you're an aspiring biological alchemist too, don't click away just yet, because this was only the first half of the incredible conversation with Dr. Craig Koniver. InnerVerse Plus members on Patreon are deep in the second hour, passing the frontiers of health science and cutting-edge medicine. The members only hour will introduce you to the wild world of peptides.
So there's peptides to help push out growth hormone, to help people come more physically fit. There's peptides for inflammation. There's peptides for immune modulation. There's peptides for the nervous system, peptides for the mitochondria.
Not poisonous pharmaceuticals, but real clinical tools used to heal, strengthen, and sharpen brain and body in ways most people have never imagined. And then it gets stranger, in the best way possible, as we discuss the farthest reaches of our potential.
I heard a story, this was many years ago, we talked about this one peptide, Penielon. They used the entire vial, and it was reported the patient became clairvoyant.
but every upgrade starts with awareness. This talk isn't just about enhancement, it's about deep restoration. The kind that begins when you finally know what's out of whack with your hormones.
The way I look at hormones is like kids on a playground. They have different flavors and personalities, and it's about melding those personalities together to find what works best for each individual.
When you're ready to move from reaction to resonance, join InnerVerse Plus and meet us in the second hour. It's not just information, it's the vibe you've been looking for. Tap in at patreon.com/InnerVerse or join the YouTube channel membership. The gigantic archive of extended shows is waiting for you. If you're feeling the call to explore deeper into the InnerVerse, head over to InnerVersePodcast.com, where you'll find all these illuminating episodes, including recent mind-blowing content you might have missed. While you're there, check out the Sound Healing page, where you can book a one-on-one Biofield tuning session with Chance, or explore tons of free knowledge about your energetic anatomy and how to decipher the messages your body is sending you. These powerful sessions can help you clear energetic blockages, reframe rigid personality problems, and resolve negative trauma-based conditioning so you can vibe with your highest self and unlimit your potential. InnerVerse is also supported by listener purchases from TippecanoeHerbs.com, one of the best sources on earth for potent plant medicines and esoteric herbalism education. Use coupon code InnerVerse for 10% off your cart. Or drop into the episode description and find our affiliate link with Lotus Way and pick up some incredible flower essence elixirs and aromatic sprays to augment your frequency with powerful positive energy. In a world where medicine has monetized a maintenance model and pathologized mind-body miracles, presence is the most powerful prescription. Thanks for sharing yours with InnerVerse. And remember, the most advanced technology in your body is balance.